They said she was defective, worthless. A warrior with no wolf was nothing but dead weight in a kingdom built on blood and power. For years, Lyra Vale endured the whispers, the mockery, the cold stares from soldiers who fought beside her but never truly saw her as one of them. She clung to one fragile hope, Prince Rowan's promise that she was enough. But tonight, beneath a moon that witnessed oaths and betrayals alike, that promise shattered. Standing alone in the sacred ritual circle while the entire kingdom watched, Lyra felt the weight of humiliation crush her chest. The prince she loved, the man who swore he'd claim her, turned his back and walked away. Then the impossible happened. King Thorn, the feared alpha ruler who'd never shown mercy to anyone, descended from his throne, strode into the circle, and declared before gods and witnesses, "If my brother will not claim her, then I will." This is the story of a girl everyone called broken, and the king who saw a queen. The training yard of Riveran Fortress reeked of sweat, blood, and wolf musk. Lyra Vale drove her blade into the practice dummy with enough force to split wood. Her arms burned, her lungs screamed. Sweat poured down her temple and soaked into the leather strap holding back her dark hair. Around her, other soldiers moved through drills with effortless grace, their wolves humming beneath their skin like coiled springs ready to explode. She had no wolf. She never had. "Again," she whispered to herself, resetting her stance. The blade came down, clean, precise, perfect. It didn't matter. "Hey, Vale," a voice called from across the yard. "You trying to become the wolf, or are you just compensating?" Laughter rippled through the training ground. Lyra didn't look up. She knew the voice. Garrick, a mid-level enforcer who'd made it his personal mission to remind her daily that she didn't belong. "Leave her alone, Garrick," another voice cut in, sharper. "She trains harder than half your squad combined." Lyra glanced up. Mira, one of the few soldiers who didn't treat her like a mistake, stood with arms crossed near the weapons rack. Mira's wolf simmered just beneath her skin, visible in the gold flicker of her eyes. Garrick smirked. "Training hard doesn't mean shit if you can't shift. She's dead weight in a real fight." "Then why does she beat you in every sparring match?" Mira shot back. Garrick's grin faltered. "That's sparring. Real combat's different. When the wolves come out, she'll freeze." "Keep talking," Lyra said quietly, still facing the dummy. "It won't change the fact that I've been chosen for the moon ritual." The yard went silent. Every head turned. Garrick's expression twisted into something ugly. "Chosen? By who? The kitchen staff?" Lyra finally met his gaze. "By Prince Rowan." The silence deepened. Then someone laughed, nervous, disbelieving. Another soldier whispered something to his partner. Mira's eyes went wide. "You're lying," Garrick said flatly. Lyra didn't respond. She sheathed her blade, slung her training pack over one shoulder, and walked toward the barracks. Behind her, the whispers exploded like wildfire. The prince had promised her. Lyra replayed the memory as she scrubbed dirt and sweat from her skin in the communal washroom. 3 months ago, Rowan had found her alone in the North Tower, her favorite place to escape the endless noise of the fortress. He'd smiled that easy, charming smile and sat beside her without asking permission. "You don't have to prove anything to them," he'd said softly. "I have to prove everything," Lyra had replied. "I'm the only soldier in this fortress without a wolf." "That doesn't make you weak. It makes me useless." Rowan had reached out then, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. His touch had been warm, gentle. "You're not useless to me." Her heart had stuttered. "I've been watching you, Lyra," he continued. "You're stronger than most wolves I know. You just haven't awakened yet." "I'm 23, she'd whispered. "If I haven't shifted by now, I never will." "Maybe you just need the right bond." She'd stared at him, afraid to hope. "I want to claim you," Rowan had said, "at the next moon ritual. I want you to stand with me in front of the entire kingdom and let them see what I see, a warrior who doesn't need a wolf to be extraordinary." Tears had blurred her vision. Rowan, say yes. And she had. God's help her, she had. Now, as Lyra dried off and pulled on a clean tunic, doubt gnawed at the edges of her mind. Rowan had been distant lately. He still smiled when they passed in the halls, still whispered reassurances when no one else was listening. But he hadn't sought her out the way he used to, hadn't sat with her in the tower, hadn't kissed her since the night he made his promise. Stop, Lyra told herself firmly. He's a prince. He's busy. Talking to yourself again? Lyra jumped. Mira stood in the doorway, arms crossed, one eyebrow raised. You scared me, Lyra muttered. You were 1,000 miles away. Mira stepped inside and lowered her voice. Is it true? Did Rowan really choose you? Lyra hesitated, then nodded. Mira exhaled slowly. Lyra, do you have any idea what kind of storm that's going to cause? I know. No, I don't think you do. Mira moved closer, her expression serious. The nobles are going to lose their minds. A wolfless woman becoming royalty? They'll fight it. They'll fight you. Let them. And Rowan? Mira stopped herself. Lyra's stomach tightened. What about Rowan? Mira looked away. Nothing. Forget I said anything. Mira. Look, I've seen the way he acts around pressure. When the council pushes back, when the nobles start circling, he folds. Every time. He won't fold on this, Lyra said firmly. He promised. Mira didn't look convinced, but she squeezed Lyra's shoulder anyway. I hope you're right. The castle of Ravarin was a fortress carved from black stone and ancient magic. It loomed over the city like a watchful predator, its towers sharp as claws against the sky. Inside, the halls were lined with wolf pelts and weapons forged in dragonfire. Every surface seemed designed to remind you that this was a kingdom built on strength. Lyra hated it. She walked through the corridors now, heading toward the royal wing where Rowan had asked to meet her. Servants stepped aside as she passed, their eyes flickering with curiosity. Word had spread fast. Is that her? The wolfless one? I heard Prince Rowan's claiming her at the ritual. That can't be true. The king would never allow it. Lyra kept her chin up and her expression neutral. She'd learned long ago not to react to the whispers. Reacting only made them worse. She reached the prince's chambers and knocked twice. Come in, Rowan's voice called. She pushed open the heavy door and stepped inside. Rowan stood near the window, bathed in late afternoon light. He was handsome in the way princes were supposed to be. Tall, lean, with golden hair and a smile that could disarm an army. He turned when she entered, and for a moment everything felt right again. Lyra, he said warmly, I'm glad you came. You asked me to, she replied, closing the door behind her. He crossed the room and took her hands. His touch was warm, familiar. I wanted to see you before the ritual. Make sure you're ready. I'm ready. Good. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Because things are going to get complicated. I know. The nobles are already talking. My father... He stopped himself. The king isn't pleased. Lyra's chest tightened. What did he say? He thinks I'm making a mistake. Rowan released her hands and turned back toward the window. He thinks claiming a wolfless woman will make me look weak. And what do you think? Rowan was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer. I think you're brave and strong, and that should be enough. Should be, Lyra repeated carefully. He turned back to her, reaching out to cup her face. It is enough, for me. I need you to understand that this won't be easy. There will be people who oppose us, who try to tear us apart. Then we fight them together, Lyra said. Rowan's expression flickered with something she couldn't read. Together, he echoed. He kissed her then, gentle, brief, almost hesitant. When he pulled back, Lyra felt the first cold whisper of fear curl around her heart. The king's throne room was a cathedral of power. Lyra had only been inside once before, years ago, when she'd first been accepted into the royal guard. She remembered the oppressive weight of the space, the vaulted ceiling, the columns carved with snarling wolves, the throne itself, a massive seat of black stone and iron that seemed to drink in the light. And she remembered the king. Thorn Ravarin was not a man you forgot. He was tall, taller even than Rowan, with broad shoulders and a presence that filled every corner of the room. His hair was dark, streaked with silver at the temples. His eyes were pale gray, cold as winter steel. Scars marked his hands and neck, badges of survival in a world that rewarded only the strong. He terrified her. Now standing in the shadows of the upper gallery, Lyra watched as the king listened to his council argue about her. "She's an insult to the bloodline," Lord Varric, a silver-haired noble, spat. "A wolfless woman has no place in the royal family." "Prince Rowan has made his choice," another council member countered. "We cannot simply override—" "We can, and we should." Varric slammed his fist on the table. "This is a mockery of everything we stand for. The claiming ritual is sacred. It binds power to power. What power does she bring?" Silence fell. King Thorn leaned back in his throne, fingers steepled beneath his chin. His expression was unreadable. "Your Majesty," Varric pressed, "you must forbid this." Thorn's gaze shifted, slowly, deliberately, toward the gallery where Lyra stood hidden in shadow. Her breath caught. He saw her. She didn't know how, but she knew with absolute certainty that the king saw her. "My brother's choices are his own," Thorn said at last, his voice low and cold. "If he wishes to claim the wolfless soldier, that is his right." Varric's face turned red. However, Thorn's gaze didn't leave Lyra. If the girl cannot survive what comes after, that will also be her burden to bear. The word sent ice down Lyra's spine. The council meeting ended shortly after. Nobles filed out, still muttering their disapproval. Lyra waited until the room was nearly empty before slipping back toward the exit. "Leaving so soon?" She froze. King Thorn stood at the base of the stairs, hands clasped behind his back. Up close, he was even more imposing. His wolf radiated from him like heat from a forge. "Your Majesty," Lyra said carefully, bowing her head. "I didn't mean to intrude." "And yet you did." She lifted her chin. "I wanted to hear what they'd say about me. And now you have." He studied her with those unsettling gray eyes. "Tell me, Lyra Vale, do you truly believe my brother will claim you?" The question hit like a blade between her ribs. "He promised," she said. "Promises are easy when there's no cost," Thorn replied. "But tomorrow night, standing in that circle, with the entire kingdom watching, promises become expensive." "He won't abandon me." "Won't he?" Thorn stepped closer. "My brother is many things, charming, kind, but strong." He shook his head slowly. "Strength is not his gift." "Then why are you allowing this?" Lyra demanded. "If you think I'm such a mistake—" "I didn't say you were a mistake." His voice dropped lower. "I said you'd have to survive what comes after." Lyra's pulse hammered. "What does that mean?" Thorn regarded her for a long moment. Then, without answering, he turned and walked away. Well, the days leading up to the moon ritual blurred together in a haze of preparation and rising tension. Nobles arrived from every corner of the kingdom, filling the castle with silk and jewels and thinly veiled contempt. Lyra felt their stares everywhere she went. In the dining hall, the training yard, even the chapel. And then Lady Isolde arrived. She swept into the castle like a storm, beautiful, poised, dripping with confidence. Her wolf was strong. You could feel it in the air around her. She came from one of the oldest bloodlines in Ravarine, and within hours of her arrival, she'd charmed half the court, including Rowan. Lyra watched from across the banquet hall as Isolde laughed at something the prince said, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Rowan smiled back, looking more relaxed than he had in weeks. "She's good," Mira muttered, appearing at Lyra's side. "I'll give her that." "She's just being polite," Lyra said. "Polite?" Mira snorted. "Is that what we're calling it?" Lyra didn't respond. She forced herself to look away, to focus on her meal, to ignore the sick twist in her stomach. But later that night, when she finally caught Rowan alone in the corridor, the doubts came flooding back. "Who is she?" Lyra asked. Rowan blinked. "Who?" "Lady Isolde." "Oh." He waved a hand dismissively. "Just a noble woman. Her family wanted to pay respects before the ritual." "She seems friendly." Rowan's expression softened. "Lyra, Are you jealous? No, I just... She stopped herself. Never mind. He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. You have nothing to worry about. Tomorrow night, I'm claiming you. Everything else is just noise. She wanted to believe him. She wanted it so badly it hurt. Promise me, she whispered. I promise. He kissed her forehead and walked away. Lyra stood alone in the corridor, listening to his footsteps fade. The night before the ritual, Lyra couldn't sleep. She sat in the north tower, legs dangling over the edge of the stone railing, staring out at the moonlit kingdom below. The wind was cold. The stars were sharp. Everything felt fragile. You'll catch your death up here. Lyra's heart lurched. She turned to find King Thorn standing in the tower doorway, arms crossed. I needed air, she said carefully. Alone the night before your claiming? He stepped onto the balcony. That's either very brave or very foolish. Maybe both. Thorn's mouth twitched, almost a smile. He moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his wolf. Why are you here? Lyra asked. I could ask you the same question. I told you I needed air, and I needed to see if you'd run. Lyra stiffened. I'm not running. Good. He leaned against the railing, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Because tomorrow, when you step into that circle, there will be no mercy. The nobles will tear you apart if they sense weakness. And my brother? He trailed off. Your brother loves me, Lyra said. Thorn finally looked at her. Does he? The question gutted her. He promised, she whispered. Lyra. Thorn's voice was softer now. I've watched you train. I've seen you fight. You're stronger than half the wolves in this kingdom, and you don't even have a beast to call on. That takes a kind of courage most people will never understand. Her throat tightened. Then why do I feel like I'm about to lose everything? Thorn didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his words were quiet. Because you might. Tears burned behind her eyes. She refused to let them fall. But if you do, Thorn continued, it won't be because you weren't enough. It will be because he wasn't. Lyra turned to face him fully. Why are you telling me this? The king studied her for a long moment. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. Lyra sat alone in the tower until dawn. The moon ritual began at sundown. The entire kingdom gathered in the great courtyard. Nobles and soldiers and common folk pressed shoulder to shoulder beneath a sky streaked with purple and gold. At the center of the courtyard stood the claiming circle, a ring of ancient stones carved with runes that glowed faintly in the fading light. Lyra stood at the edge of the crowd, dressed in the simple white gown tradition demanded. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Mira squeezed her hand. You've got this. I hope so. You do. Mira's eyes were fierce. And if Rowan backs out, I'll gut him myself. Lyra managed a shaky laugh. The ceremonial drums began to beat, a low primal rhythm that echoed through the courtyard. One by one, the wolves stepped forward to claim their mates. Each pair entered the circle, spoke their vows, and sealed the bond with a mark that glowed silver beneath their skin. Lyra watched, her pulse thundering. And then it was time. Prince Rowan of House Raverin, the elder called. Step forward. The crowd parted. Rowan emerged dressed in ceremonial armor that caught the torchlight. He looked every inch a prince, handsome, regal, untouchable. He did not look at Lyra. Lyra Vale, the elder called. Step forward. Lyra's legs felt like stone, but she moved. One step, then another. The crowd's whispers rose like a wave. She entered the circle. Rowan stood at the center, his back to her. Prince Rowan, the elder intoned. Do you claim this woman as your mate? Silence. Rowan turned slowly, and Lyra saw the truth in his eyes. Rowan's voice cracked. I cannot. The world shattered. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Lyra stood frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. I'm sorry, Rowan whispered. I can't do this. Laughter erupted from the nobles, cruel, delighted. The sound wrapped around Lyra like chains. She was dimly aware of tears streaming down her face, of Mira shouting something from the crowd, of the world tilting sideways. And then the throne room doors exploded open with a sound like thunder. King Thorn strode into the courtyard, his wolf blazing around him like a living storm. The crowd fell silent. Even the laughter died. He walked straight toward the circle, straight toward Lyra. The elder stepped back, eyes wide. "Your Majesty." Thorn ignored him. He stepped into the sacred circle, stopping directly in front of Lyra. His pale gray eyes locked onto hers. "If my brother will not claim you," Thorn said, his voice carrying across the silent courtyard, "then I will." He extended his hand. The world held its breath. Lyra stared at the king's outstretched hand, at the scars marking his knuckles, at the wolf blazing just beneath his skin, and she made a choice. She took his hand. The bond snapped into place like lightning. Power surged through Lyra's body, raw, ancient, overwhelming. She gasped, her knees buckling, but Thorn's grip was iron. He held her upright as the claiming mark burned silver across both their wrists. The crowd erupted into chaos, but Lyra barely heard it, because deep inside her chest, something long dormant cracked open, and her wolf, finally, began to wake. The claiming mark burned like a brand. Lyra gasped as silver light flared across her wrist, searing into her skin with a heat that was both agony and ecstasy. The bond snapped tight between her and the king, a living thread of power that hummed with ancient magic. She felt Thorn's wolf surge against hers, felt the raw dominance of an alpha pressing against the dormant thing inside her chest that had never awakened. Until now. The courtyard exploded into chaos. Nobles shouted over one another, their voices a cacophony of outrage and disbelief. Soldiers shifted nervously, hands drifting toward weapons. The elder who'd presided over the ritual stood frozen, his mouth hanging open. "This is madness," Lord Varric's voice cut through the noise. "Your Majesty, you cannot—" "I can," Thorn said coldly, his eyes never leaving Lyra's face. "And I have." Lyra's knees threatened to buckle. The power coursing through her veins was overwhelming, like trying to hold lightning in her bare hands. She could feel something stirring deep inside her, something vast and ancient that had been sleeping for 23 years. Her wolf. "Breathe," Thorn murmured, his voice low enough that only she could hear. His grip on her hand tightened. "The first bond is always the hardest. Don't fight it." "I can't—" Lyra's voice broke. "I can't control—" "You don't need to control it. Just survive it." The silver light intensified, spreading up both their arms like living fire. Lyra felt her wolf claw at the edges of her consciousness, demanding release. Her vision blurred, her heartbeat thundered in her ears. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the light faded. The bond settled into a low, constant hum beneath her skin. Lyra sucked in air, her entire body trembling. The mark on her wrist had cooled to a faint silver scar, intricate and beautiful, unlike anything she'd ever seen. Thorn released her hand slowly. "Can you stand?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. The king turned to face the crowd, his presence radiating authority. "The claim is made. The bond is sealed. Anyone who disputes it can challenge me directly." Silence fell like a guillotine blade. No one moved. Thorn's wolf blazed around him, a silent promise of violence to anyone foolish enough to test him. Lyra could feel it now, the sheer crushing weight of his power. This was an alpha who had fought his way to the throne through blood and brutality. This was a king who did not make idle threats. "The ritual is concluded," the elder said weakly. "May the moon bless this union." The words sounded hollow. The crowd remained frozen, shock etched into every face. All except one. Rowan stood at the edge of the circle, his expression twisted into something between horror and disbelief. His eyes locked onto Lyra's, and she saw the moment he realized what he'd lost. She felt nothing. The girl who'd loved him, who'd believed his promises, who'd clung to hope like a lifeline. That girl had died the moment he'd walked away. What stood in her place now was something harder, sharper, something that would not break again. "Come," Thorn said quietly, offering his arm. "We're leaving." Lyra took it without hesitation. They walked through the crowd together, and the sea of people parted before them like water before a blade. Whispers followed in their wake. Some fearful, some awed, all shocked. Mira caught Lyra's eye from the crowd. Her friend's face was pale, her eyes wide, but she nodded once. A silent message. You survived. Lyra nodded back, but she knew the truth. Surviving the ritual was only the beginning. The real war was about to start. The king's chambers were a fortress within a fortress. Lyra had never been inside before. The space was massive, vaulted ceilings, walls lined with weapons and maps, a fireplace large enough to roast an entire stag. Everything was dark wood and black stone, designed for function rather than comfort. Thorn closed the heavy door behind them, and the noise of the courtyard faded to nothing. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Lyra stood in the center of the room, arms wrapped around herself, still trembling from the aftershocks of the bond. Her wolf prowled restlessly inside her chest, not fully awakened, but no longer dormant. She could feel it testing the edges of her control, curious and hungry. Sit, Thorn said, gesturing to a chair near the fire. She obeyed, sinking into the leather seat. Her legs felt like water. Thorn poured 2 glasses of dark liquor from a crystal decanter and handed one to her. Drink, it'll help. Lyra took the glass with shaking hands and downed the contents in one swallow. The alcohol burned a path down her throat, but it did help. The trembling eased slightly. Thorn sat across from her, studying her with those unsettling gray eyes. How do you feel? Like I'm going to explode. That's normal. The bond is trying to stabilize. Your wolf is waking up and it doesn't know what to do with all this new energy. He leaned back in his chair. It'll settle. Give it time. Time? Lyra laughed bitterly. The nobles aren't going to give us time. They're probably gathering right now to figure out how to undo this. Let them try. You can't fight the entire council. Can't I? Thorn's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. I've done worse. Lyra set down her glass and met his gaze. Why did you do it? Do what? Claim me. In front of everyone. You humiliated your brother. You've turned the entire court against you. Why? Thorn was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. Because I've been watching you for years, Lyra Vale. Since the day you walked into this fortress as a raw recruit with no wolf and more determination than sense, I watched you train until your hands bled. I watched you take every insult, every mockery, and turn it into fuel. I watched you refuse to break. Her breath caught. And I watched my brother dangle hope in front of you like a carrot on a string, Thorn continued, his voice hardening. I knew what he was going to do tonight. I knew he'd fold under pressure, so I made a choice. To claim me yourself. To protect you. The words hung in the air between them. I don't need protection, Lyra said quietly. Everyone needs protection from something. Thorn leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. But if you want to survive what's coming, you're going to need more than protection. You're going to need to be stronger than you've ever been, because the nobles won't stop until they've destroyed this bond, or destroyed you. Then what do? We make them regret trying. The first attack came the next morning. Lyra woke to shouting in the corridor outside Thorn's chambers. She bolted upright, her wolf surging instinctively toward the surface. The bond mark on her wrist flared hot. The door burst open. Mira rushed inside, her face flushed. You need to get up, now. What's happening? The council's called an emergency session. They're demanding the king annul the claim. Lyra's stomach dropped. Can they do that? They can try. Mira grabbed Lyra's arm and pulled her toward the wardrobe. But you need to be there. You need to fight back. Within minutes, Lyra was dressed in the formal leathers expected of a royal mate. The clothing felt foreign, too fine, too heavy with expectation. But she forced herself to stand straight, to breathe, to center herself the way she'd learned in combat training. Where's Thorn? She asked. Already in the throne room. He sent me to get you. Mira paused, her expression softening. Lyra, it's bad. Half the council wants your head, the other half wants the king's. Then we'll give them neither. They hurried through the corridors, past servants who averted their eyes and guards who stared with open hostility. The whispers had already spread through the castle like poison. The wolfless queen. The king's mistake. The girl who should have died in that circle. Lyra lifted her chin and kept walking. The throne room was packed. Nobles filled every corner, their voices a storm of anger and indignation. At the center of the chaos sat King Thorn on his black throne, expression carved from stone. He didn't react to the shouting, didn't flinch. He simply waited. Lyra entered through the side door, and the room fell silent. Every eye turned to her. She walked slowly across the marble floor, feeling the weight of their judgment like physical blows. The bond mark on her wrist pulsed with heat, and she knew Thorn could feel her approaching. "Your Majesty," she said, stopping before the throne and bowing her head. "Rise," Thorn said quietly. She obeyed. Lord Varric stepped forward from the crowd, his face twisted with rage. "This is an outrage. A wolfless woman has no right to stand where queens have stood." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the nobles. "She is not a queen," Thorn said coldly. "She is my mate. The bond is sealed. That is law." "Law can be challenged," another noble shouted. "The council has the right to review any claim that threatens the stability of the crown." "Threatens the stability?" Thorn's voice dropped to something dangerous. "The only threat to stability in this room is the people questioning their king." "We're questioning your judgment," Varric slammed his fist on the council table. "You claimed a defective soldier to spite your brother. This isn't about the girl. It's about proving a point." "Watch your words carefully, Varric." Or what? You'll have me executed for speaking truth?" Varric turned to address the room. This king has always been ruthless, cold, but now he's reckless. He's let his pride endanger the entire kingdom. The crowd murmured louder. Lyra felt her wolf stir, anger bleeding through the bond, but Thorn remained perfectly still. "If you believe I've endangered the kingdom," Thorn said quietly, "then challenge me for the throne." The room went silent. Varric's face paled. "Your Majesty, you claim I'm unfit to rule. Prove it. Step into the challenge ring and take my crown." Thorn's eyes glittered with cold amusement. "Unless, of course, you're only brave when you're shouting from the safety of the council floor." No one moved. No one spoke. Varric's mouth worked soundlessly. "That's what I thought." Thorn leaned back in his throne. "Anyone else wish to question my judgment?" Silence. Then a voice spoke from the back of the room. "I do." The crowd parted. Lady Isolde stepped forward, beautiful and poised in a gown of deep crimson. Her wolf shimmered beneath her skin, powerful and controlled. She curtsied gracefully before the throne. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "I mean no disrespect, but the council raises a valid concern. A royal mate must be able to protect the crown, to stand beside you in battle, to lead when necessary." She glanced at Lyra. "Can she do any of those things without a wolf?" The question landed like a blade between Lyra's ribs. "She survived the claiming," Thorn said. "That should be proof enough. Surviving the ritual is one thing. Surviving the challenges that come after is another." Isolde's smile was sympathetic. Too sympathetic. Perhaps a trial would be appropriate. A way for her to prove herself worthy of the bond. Murmurs of agreement swept through the room. Lyra felt her pulse quicken. This was a trap. She could see it in Isolde's eyes, hear it in the carefully chosen words. "What kind of trial?" Thorn asked, his voice flat. "The hunt." Isolde's smile widened. "A royal tradition. The mate must survive 3 days in the northern wilderness, hunted by the kingdom's best wolves. If she survives, her place is secured. If she doesn't," she shrugged delicately, "then the bond was not meant to be." The room erupted. Some nobles protested, calling it barbaric. Others supported it, arguing that it was fair. But Lyra barely heard them. She was staring at Isolde, seeing the calculation behind those beautiful eyes. This woman wasn't just a noble woman. She was a predator, and she wanted Lyra dead. "No," Thorn said flatly. "Your Majesty," Varric began. "I said no." Thorn's wolf blazed. "I will not send my mate into the wilderness to be hunted like prey." "Then you admit she's too weak to survive," Isolde said softly. The words hung in the air. Lyra felt the trap snap shut. If Thorn refused, he looked weak. If he agreed, she could die. There was only one way out. "I'll do it," Lyra said. The room went silent. Thorn's head snapped toward her. Lyra, bet. I'll do it, she repeated, louder this time. She turned to face Isolde. 3 days in the northern wilderness, hunted by your best wolves. If I survive, the council accepts the bond. No more challenges, no more trials. Isolde's smile was sharp. Agreed. Lyra, no. Thorn started to rise. Your Majesty. Lyra met his gaze. Through the bond, she felt his fury, his fear, his desperate need to protect her. But she also felt something else. His faith. I need to do this. You know I do. A muscle worked in Thorn's jaw. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then slowly, he nodded. 3 days, he said, his voice like iron. But I choose the hunters. Isolde's smile faltered slightly. Your Majesty. Those are my terms. Accept them, or the trial doesn't happen. Isolde hesitated, then inclined her head. As you wish. The council erupted into discussion, but Lyra barely heard it. She was staring at her wrist, at the silver bond mark that pulsed with heat. Through the bond, Thorn's voice echoed in her mind. What have you done? What I had to, she thought back. The preparation for the hunt consumed the next 2 days. Lyra spent every waking hour training, running through the fortress grounds, practicing survival techniques, drilling combat maneuvers with Mira. Her wolf stirred restlessly inside her, stronger now, but still not fully awake. She could feel it prowling at the edges of her consciousness, curious and impatient. You need to shift, Mira said on the second day, breathing hard after a sparring match. Before the hunt, you need to meet your wolf. I've tried, Lyra said. It won't come. Then try harder. But it wasn't that simple. Lyra could feel the wolf inside her, could sense its power, its hunger. But every time she reached for it, the connection slipped away like water through her fingers. It'll come when it's ready, Thorn said that night. They sat in his chambers sharing a quiet meal. The bond between them had settled into something almost comfortable, a constant presence that connected their thoughts and emotions. Lyra could feel his worry, his anger at the council for forcing this trial. What if it's not ready in time, she asked. Then you survive without it. You've done that your entire life. This is different. I'll be hunted by trained wolves, elite soldiers. You'll be hunted by the wolves I choose, Thorn corrected, and I'm choosing carefully. Lyra set down her fork. Who? People who'll give you a fighting chance. People who owe me favors. He paused. And Garrick. Garrick? Lyra's head snapped up. He hates me, which is why he'll hunt you hard, but he's also predictable. You've trained with him for years. You know how he thinks. Thorn's expression was grim. The others, they're skilled, but they won't kill you unless I give the order, and I won't. What if Isolde plants someone? Then they'll die before they reach you. The certainty in his voice sent a shiver down her spine. This was the Alpha King speaking, the man who'd built his throne on the corpses of his enemies. I'm not going to let you die, Lyra, Thorn said quietly. Do you understand me? She nodded, throat tight. You survive these 3 days. You come back. And then we make them all regret doubting you. Bomb. The night before the hunt, Lyra couldn't sleep. She stood on the balcony of Thorn's chambers, staring out at the dark forest that stretched north beyond the fortress. That forest would be her hunting ground, her battlefield, her grave, if she wasn't careful. Second thoughts? Lyra turned to find Thorn leaning against the doorway, arms crossed. He wore only loose pants, his scarred chest bare. The bond mark glowed faintly on his wrist. No second thoughts, she said. Just thinking. About? Everything. Rowan, the ritual, how I got here. She laughed bitterly. A week ago, I thought I was going to be claimed by a prince. Now I'm bonded to a king and about to be hunted through the wilderness. Regrets? She considered the question. Then slowly she shook her head. No. Rowan would have destroyed me slowly. You... She trailed off. I what? You gave me a chance to be something more. Thorn crossed the balcony to stand beside her. They were close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. could see the way the moonlight caught in his gray eyes. "You were always something more," he said quietly. "You just didn't see it." "And you did?" "From the first day you walked into this fortress." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he traced the bond mark on her wrist with one finger. "I watched you fight for a place in a world that told you you didn't belong. I watched you refuse to quit, even when quitting would have been easier. That's not weakness, Lyra. That's strength most wolves will never have." Her breath caught. "Thorn?" "Survive tomorrow," he said, his voice rough. "Come back to me, and I swear on my crown, no one will ever doubt you again." The words settled into her bones like a promise carved in stone. Lyra leaned forward, closing the distance between them, and pressed her forehead against his chest. Thorn's arms came around her, strong, steady, protective. Through the bond, she felt his wolf surge against hers, felt the way they recognized each other, accepted each other. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt like she belonged. "I'll survive," she whispered. "I promise. I know you will." They stood like that until dawn broke over the mountains. The hunt began at midday. Lyra stood at the edge of the northern forest, dressed in simple hunting leathers with only a knife strapped to her thigh. No supplies, no food, no shelter. Those were the rules. Behind her, the crowd had gathered to watch, nobles dressed in finery, soldiers in uniform, common folk who'd heard the stories and wanted to see if the wolfless queen would survive. Thorn stood at the front of the crowd, expression unreadable. Through the bond, she felt his steady presence, his faith. The 5 hunters stood opposite her, Garrick, predictably smug, 3 soldiers she recognized from the guard, and one she didn't know, a lean woman with ice-blue eyes and a wolf that radiated cold menace. That was Isolde's plant. Lyra was sure of it. "The rules are simple," the elder announced. 3 days. If the mate survives until sunset on the 3rd day, she is accepted. If the hunters capture her before then, the bond is dissolved. "And if they kill her?" someone from the crowd shouted. "Then the trial ends." Lyra's stomach twisted. She met Thorn's eyes across the distance. "Come back to me." His voice echoed through the bond. "I will." The elder raised his hand. "The hunt begins. Now." Lyra ran. She plunged into the forest at a dead sprint, her wolf surging beneath her skin. The trees closed around her like teeth. Behind her, she heard the howls of the hunting party as they shifted and gave chase. The game had begun, and Lyra Vale was no longer prey waiting to be caught. She was a fighter, and she would survive. The northern forest swallowed her whole. Lyra's boots pounded against frozen earth as she crashed through undergrowth, branches whipping her face and tearing at her clothes. Her lungs burned, her heart hammered against her ribs like a war drum. Behind her, the howls of the hunting party echoed through the trees. 5 wolves who wanted nothing more than to prove the king had made a catastrophic mistake. She couldn't outrun them forever. She knew that. But she didn't need forever. She just needed 3 days. The wolf inside her chest surged, responding to the primal terror of being hunted. Lyra felt claws scrape against the inside of her skin, felt her vision sharpen as the beast clawed toward the surface. But it still wouldn't break through, still wouldn't fully emerge. "Come on," she gasped, stumbling over a root. "I need you." The wolf paced restlessly but didn't answer. A howl split the air, closer now, maybe 200 yards behind her. Garrick. She recognized the particular pitch of his wolf's voice, the aggressive edge that matched his personality. Lyra changed direction, veering west toward the sound of running water. If she could reach the river, she could mask her scent, buy herself time to think, to plan, to survive. The forest grew denser. Ancient trees towered overhead, their branches forming a canopy so thick that barely any light penetrated. The temperature dropped. Frost clung to everything, turning the world into shades of silver and gray. She burst through a final stand of trees and nearly tumbled down a steep embankment. Below, a river churned white with rapids, the water so cold it steamed in the winter air. Lyra didn't hesitate. She slid down the embankment, grabbed onto an overhanging branch, and swung herself out over the water. For one breathless moment, she hung suspended above the rapids. Then she let go. The water hit her like a fist made of ice. The current seized her immediately, dragging her under. Lyra's lungs screamed. Her limbs went numb. She kicked hard, broke the surface, gasped air, and then the river pulled her down again. The bond mark on her wrist flared with heat, Thorn sensing her distress through their connection. She felt his alarm spike, felt him reaching for her across the distance. "I'm alive," she thought desperately. "I'm okay." The current spat her out into calmer water. Lyra dragged herself onto the opposite bank, coughing and shaking violently. Her lips were blue. Her fingers wouldn't bend properly, but she was across the river, and her scent trail had been washed away. She forced herself to stand and stumbled into the tree line. Behind her, on the far bank, shapes emerged from the forest. 5 wolves, massive and deadly, their eyes glowing in the shadows. Garrick's wolf was the largest, a brindled beast with scars across its muzzle. The others fanned out, testing the air. The lean woman with ice-blue eyes shifted back to human form, naked and unbothered by the cold. Her gaze locked onto Lyra across the water. "Clever," the woman called, her voice carrying over the river's roar. "But you can't run forever." Lyra didn't waste breath responding. She turned and ran deeper into the forest. Oh, night fell like a hammer. The temperature plummeted. Lyra's wet clothes turned to ice against her skin. She'd found a hollow beneath a fallen tree and crawled inside, pressing herself against the frozen earth in a desperate attempt to conserve body heat. She was shaking so hard her teeth rattled. The bond mark pulsed with warmth, Thorn, trying to send her strength through their connection. She clung to that heat, that lifeline, as exhaustion dragged at her consciousness. "Sleep and you die," her wolf warned. The beast was more present now, its voice clearer in her mind. Not fully awakened, but no longer dormant either. The claiming bond had cracked something open inside her, and the hunt was forcing it wider. "I know," Lyra thought back, "but I need rest. Then rest fast. They're coming." Lyra's eyes snapped open. She strained her ears, listening past the wind and the distant river. There, the soft crunch of paws on frozen ground. The hunters had crossed the river. They'd picked up her trail. She forced her numb body to move, crawling out of the hollow. The forest was pitch black, the moon hidden behind thick clouds. Lyra couldn't see more than a few feet in any direction, but wolves could see in the dark. She was blind, and they were not. A branch snapped to her left. Lyra spun, her hand flying to the knife at her thigh. The blade felt pathetically small against creatures that could tear her apart with their bare teeth. "You're making this too easy," Garrick's voice called from the darkness. He'd shifted back to human form. "I thought you'd be more of a challenge." Lyra didn't answer. She was calculating distances, angles, escape routes. The hollow tree was behind her. Dense undergrowth to the right, a steep slope to the left. "The king made a mistake claiming you," Garrick continued, his voice moving through the trees. "Everyone knows it. Even he knows it. This whole trial is just a formality before he admits the truth." "Is that what you tell yourself?" Lyra called back, forcing steadiness into her voice. "That the king made a mistake? Or are you just angry because you've spent your whole life trying to prove you're strong, and I beat you without even having a wolf?" Silence. Then a growl, low, furious, inhuman. "I'm going to enjoy dragging you back," Garrick snarled. "Then come get me." The wolf burst from the darkness like a nightmare-given form. Lyra saw it for only a heartbeat, massive jaws, gleaming teeth, eyes burning with rage. She threw herself sideways, hit the ground hard, and rolled. The wolf's jaws snapped shut on empty air. Lyra kicked out blindly. Her boot connected with something solid. The wolf yelped and stumbled. She scrambled to her feet and ran. The slope was right there. She didn't think, didn't hesitate, just dove over the edge and let gravity take her. The world became a chaotic tumble of rocks and roots and frozen earth. Something sharp tore across her shoulder. Her head cracked against a stone. She hit the bottom in a heap, vision swimming with stars. Above her, Garrick's wolf appeared at the top of the slope, silhouetted against the sky. It snarled once, then began picking its way down. Lyra forced herself up. Her shoulders screamed in protest. Blood ran hot down her arms, steaming in the frigid air. But she could move. She could still fight. The wolf reached the bottom and stalked toward her, teeth bared. "Just so you know," Lyra said, pulling her knife, "I'm not going down easy." The wolf lunged. Lyra dove beneath its attack, feeling claws rake across her back. She twisted and drove her knife upward, aiming for the soft tissue beneath the wolf's jaw. The blade bit deep. Hot blood sprayed across her hands. The wolf howled and thrashed, throwing Lyra backward. She hit a tree hard enough to knock the air from her lungs. Her knife stayed buried in the wolf's flesh as Garrick shifted back to human form, clutching his throat where blood poured between his fingers. "You," he gasped. "You stabbed me. You tried to kill me. This is a hunt. We're supposed to—" He coughed, more blood spilling from his lips. "Thorn's going to execute you for this. Then he can get in line behind you." Garrick collapsed to his knees, his strength failing. The wound wasn't fatal. She'd been careful, but it was bad enough to take him out of the fight. Lyra retrieved her knife and stumbled away, leaving Garrick bleeding in the snow. 1 down, 4 to go. She made it through the first night by sheer stubbornness. By the time dawn broke gray and cold over the forest, Lyra had put 5 miles between herself and Garrick. Her body was a map of pain. The gash across her shoulder, the cuts on her back, bruises blooming across her ribs. The wet clothes had given her hypothermia. She was shaking uncontrollably, her lips blue, her thoughts sluggish. But she was alive. The bond mark pulsed steadily. Thorn's presence was a constant warmth in the back of her mind, anchoring her. She knew he could feel her pain, her exhaustion, knew he was probably losing his mind with the need to protect her. 1 more day, she thought toward him. I can do this. Through the bond, she felt his response. Not words, but emotion. Pride. Fear. Love. Love. The realization hit her like lightning. Somewhere between the claiming and the hunt, between the throne room and this frozen forest, she'd fallen in love with the Alpha King. Not the desperate, clinging love she'd felt for Rowan, but something deeper, fiercer, built on respect and trust, and the unshakable certainty that Thorn saw her, truly saw her, in a way no one else ever had. And he loved her back. A howl shattered the dawn, close, maybe half a mile away. The other hunters had regrouped and picked up her trail again. Lyra forced herself to move. She found a stream and followed it north, using the water to mask her scent again. Her hands were so numb she could barely grip branches to steady herself. Her vision kept blurring at the edges. The wolf inside her was growing restless. She could feel it pacing, growling, demanding release. It wanted to fight, wanted to hunt the hunters. Soon, Lyra promised. Just wait. No more waiting, the wolf snarled back. They're trying to kill us. Let me out. I can't. I don't know how. Then learn. The stream led her to a clearing where ancient stone ruins jutted from the earth like broken teeth. Some forgotten temple or fortress, swallowed by the forest centuries ago. Lyra stumbled into the center of the ruins and collapsed against a crumbling wall. She needed rest, just a few minutes to catch her breath, to let her body recover. She closed her eyes. Wake up! The voice was cold as winter frost. Lyra jerked awake to find the ice-eyed woman standing over her, a blade pressed against her throat. The other 3 hunters circled the clearing, their wolves barely contained beneath their skin. Did you really think you could run forever? The woman asked softly. Did you think the king's protection extended into these woods? Lyra's hand moved toward her knife. Don't! The blade pressed harder, drawing blood. You fought well, better than anyone expected, but this ends now. The trial isn't over, Lyra rasped. I still have until sunset. You won't make it that long. The woman smiled. Lady Isolde sends her regards. There it was, confirmation of what Lyra had suspected from the beginning. This hunter wasn't here to test her. She was here to kill her. Thorn will execute you for this, Lyra said. Only if he finds out. And he won't. We'll tell him you died fighting a frost bear. These woods are full of them. Tragic accident. No one to blame. The other hunters closed in, forming a wall of muscle and malice. Lyra's wolf surged inside her chest, absolutely feral with rage. The bond mark on her wrist blazed hot enough to burn. And somewhere deep in the fortress, miles away, King Thorn felt his mate's terror spike. The woman raised her blade. Nothing personal, just politics. She drove the knife down. Lyra moved on pure instinct. She grabbed the woman's wrist, twisted hard, and felt bones snap. The woman screamed. Lyra drove her knee into the hunter's stomach and rolled away as the other 3 wolves lunged. The world exploded into chaos. Claws tore through her already shredded clothes. Teeth snapped inches from her face. Lyra fought like a cornered animal, all desperation and fury and the absolute refusal to die in this frozen clearing. She felt her knife find flesh, heard someone scream, felt hot blood spray across her face, and then something inside her chest finally broke open. The wolf surged forward with the force of an avalanche. Pain ripped through Lyra's body as bones cracked and reformed. Her skin tore. Her vision exploded with color and scent and sensation. She felt herself falling forward onto hands that were no longer hands, felt power flood through muscles that had never existed before. The transformation took seconds. When it was done, a massive silver wolf stood in the center of the clearing. The hunters froze, staring. Lyra's wolf was enormous, bigger even than Garrick's, with a coat that shimmered like moonlight and eyes that burned with ancient fire. Power radiated from her in waves, primal and overwhelming. This was no ordinary wolf. This was something else, something old. The ice-eyed woman stumbled backward, her face white with terror. What are you? Lyra's wolf didn't answer. She attacked. The slaughter was brief and brutal. Lyra's wolf moved like liquid violence, all teeth and claws and fury. The hunters tried to fight back, but they were outmatched. She was faster, stronger, driven by months of humiliation and pain and the burning need to prove that she was not, had never been, weak. The ice-eyed woman went down first, her throat torn open before she could even shift. The other three lasted longer, but not by much. Lyra's wolf ripped through them like they were made of paper, her jaws crushing bone and tearing flesh. When it was over, 4 bodies lay broken in the snow. Lyra stood over them, sides heaving, muzzle stained red. The wolf inside her was satisfied, sated. And then the horror of what she'd done crashed down like a wave. She'd killed them, all of them. The shift back to human form was agony. Lyra collapsed naked in the blood-soaked snow, shaking violently. Her hands were red. Her entire body was covered in gore. "What have I done?" she whispered. "Survived," her wolf said simply. "They tried to kill us. We killed them first. Thorn will—" Her voice broke. "The council will use this against him, against us. They'll say I'm a monster." "You're a survivor. There's a difference." Lyra forced herself to stand on trembling legs. She needed to move, needed to get away from this clearing before anyone found the bodies. But as she turned to leave, she heard it, the sound of approaching footsteps. Many footsteps. She spun, heart lurching. A dozen royal guards emerged from the tree line, led by a grim-faced captain. Behind them came Thorn himself, his wolf blazing around him like a storm. His eyes found hers across the clearing, found the bodies. The blood. For one terrible moment, Lyra thought she saw judgment in his gaze. Then Thorn's expression hardened into something terrifying. He turned to the captain. "Anyone who speaks of what happened here will be executed. This was self-defense. Is that understood?" "Yes, Your Majesty." Thorn crossed the clearing and pulled Lyra into his arms, wrapping his cloak around her naked, shaking form. Through the bond, she felt his rage. Not at her, but for her. At the hunters who'd tried to murder her, at the council who'd forced this trial, at Isolde who'd orchestrated it all. "I've got you," he murmured against her hair. "You're safe now." "I killed them," Lyra whispered. "All of them." "They were trying to kill you first. That ice-eyed bitch was Isolde's assassin." He pulled back to look at her, his hands framing her face. "You did what you had to do, and your wolf—" His expression shifted to something like awe. "Lyra, your wolf is extraordinary." "What do you mean?" "You didn't see yourself, but I felt it through the bond. That's not an ordinary wolf." He touched the bond mark on her wrist. "That's ancient bloodline, royal bloodline, the kind that hasn't been seen in generations." Lyra stared at him. "That's impossible." "Is it? You survived 23 years without shifting. Most wolves emerge by age 12. The only ones who can suppress their beast that long are the ones with power too great for a child's body to contain." Thorn's eyes blazed. "You're not defective, Lyra. You never were. Your wolf was just waiting until you were strong enough to handle it." The words rearranged something fundamental inside her chest. "But the trial?" she began. "The trial is over. You survived 3 days, more than survived. You conquered." Thorn turned to address the guards. Prepare to return to the fortress, and someone find clothes for my mate. Your Majesty, the captain said carefully, what do we do about the bodies? Leave them. Let the forest take them. Thorn's voice was cold as death. They hunted my mate with the intent to kill. They got what they deserved. The journey back to the fortress took hours. Lyra rode beside Thorn, dressed in borrowed guard leathers, her body aching with every step. She'd shifted back to wolf form once more to test her new powers, and the transformation had been easier the second time, natural even. Her wolf was magnificent. She could feel its strength thrumming through her veins, could sense the way it changed everything. She was no longer the weakest soldier in the fortress. She was possibly the strongest. As they approached the fortress gates, Lyra could see the crowd that had gathered. News of the hunt's end had traveled fast. Nobles stood on the battlements. Soldiers lined the courtyard. Common folk pressed against the walls, all of them waiting to see if the wolfless queen had survived. Thorn stopped at the gates and turned to Lyra. Are you ready? She looked at the crowd, at the sea of judgmental faces, and felt her wolf rise to the surface. I'm ready. They rode through the gates side by side. The crowd erupted into shocked whispers as they saw Lyra alive, sitting tall despite her injuries. Lord Varric pushed to the front, his face twisted with disbelief. Where are the hunters? He demanded. Dead, Thorn said flatly. Gasps rippled through the crowd. She killed them? Varric's voice rose. Your Majesty, this is murder. She must be… They tried to assassinate her, Thorn interrupted, his voice cutting like a blade. One of them was a plant from Lady Isolde, sent to kill my mate and make it look like an accident. So yes, she defended herself. And yes, they died. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. Silence fell. Thorn dismounted and helped Lyra down. Then, before the entire court, he did something unprecedented. He knelt. The Alpha King, who had never bowed to anyone, dropped to one knee before his mate. You survived the impossible, he said, his voice carrying across the silent courtyard. You proved your strength, your courage, your right to stand beside me. He took her hand. And now I ask you, before all these witnesses, will you accept the title of queen? Will you rule beside me, not because tradition demands it, but because you've earned it? Tears blurred Lyra's vision. She looked down at the king kneeling before her, at the bond mark glowing on both their wrists, at the crowd of people who'd spent years telling her she was worthless. And she made her choice. I will. Thorn rose and pulled her into his arms. The kiss was fierce, claiming, witnessed by the entire kingdom. When they finally broke apart, Thorn turned to address the crowd. Anyone who wishes to challenge my queen's right to the throne can do so now. Step forward. No one moved. Then it's settled. Lyra Vale is your queen, and any further attempts to undermine her will be considered treason against the crown. Lord Varric's face had gone purple with rage. Your Majesty, you cannot… I can. I have. It's done. Thorn's eyes blazed. Unless you'd like to challenge me for the throne, I'm told you had concerns about my judgment. Varric's mouth snapped shut, but from the back of the crowd, a voice called out. Smooth, deadly, familiar. I'll challenge her. The crowd parted like water. Lady Isolde stepped forward, beautiful and cold in a gown of midnight blue. Her wolf shimmered beneath her skin, powerful and controlled. She smiled at Lyra, and it was the smile of a predator who'd been waiting for exactly this moment. The queen wants to prove she's worthy, Isolde said. Then let her prove it in the challenge ring. Wolf to wolf. Wolf. No weapons, no interference. Her eyes glittered. Unless, of course, she's afraid. The trap snapped shut. Thorn moved to speak, but Lyra touched his arm, stopping him. Through the bond, she felt his protest, his fear. But she also felt something else. Certainty. I accept, Lyra said clearly. The crowd exploded into chaos. Isolde's smile widened. Tomorrow at dawn, the entire court will bear witness. Tomorrow at dawn, Lyra agreed. Isolde turned and walked away, her entourage following like shadows. Thorn pulled Lyra close, his voice low and urgent. You don't have to do this. I can refuse the challenge on your behalf. I can… No. Lyra looked up at him. This ends tomorrow. One way or another, I'm done proving myself to people who'll never accept me. So either I beat Isolde and force them all to acknowledge me, or I die trying. You won't die. You can't promise that. Watch me. Thorn's hands framed her face. I've already lost one mate to politics and poison. I'm not losing another to pride. Lyra went still. What? Thorn's expression darkened. You didn't know? Before you there was someone else. A woman I loved. The council didn't approve of her either. She was from a minor house, no great bloodline. So they poisoned her, made it look like illness. His voice dropped to something dangerous. I spent 5 years hunting down every person involved. And when I found them, I made sure they understood the price of taking what was mine. Thorn? So no, Lyra. You're not dying tomorrow, because if you do, I'll burn this entire kingdom to the ground. He pressed his forehead against hers, including everyone who stood by and let it happen. The words should have terrified her. Instead, they made her feel safe. Then help me train, she said. Help me learn to fight as a wolf. Because I'm going to beat Isolde, and then we're going to take everything she loves and crush it into dust. Thorn's smile was sharp as broken glass. That's my queen. They trained through the night. In a private courtyard away from prying eyes, Thorn taught Lyra how to fight as a wolf, how to use her size and speed, how to target weak points, how to end a fight quickly and brutally. Her wolf learned fast. It was like the beast had been studying combat its entire dormant existence, waiting for the chance to put theory into practice. Your wolf is bigger than Isolde's, Thorn said as they circled each other in wolf form. Use that. Pin her. Don't let her get under you. Lyra lunged. Thorn dodged and nipped at her shoulder, not hard enough to injure, just enough to correct. She adjusted, came at him from a different angle, and managed to knock him off balance. Good, he said, shifting back to human. But watch your left side. You drop your guard when you're tired. They went again, and again, until Lyra's muscles screamed and her wolf was panting with exhaustion. Finally, as dawn began to gray the sky, Thorn called a stop. That's enough. You need rest. I need to be ready. You are ready. You were ready the moment your wolf emerged. He crossed to where she sat in human form, wrapped in a blanket. Isolde is skilled, but she's also overconfident. She thinks you're still the wolfless girl who stood trembling in the ritual circle. She doesn't know what you've become. And what have I become? Thorn knelt beside her. Something the kingdom hasn't seen in 300 years. The old texts call them Silverborn, wolves with ancient royal blood who could shift the balance of entire wars. They were hunted to extinction because people feared them. Lyra's breath caught. Are you saying? I'm saying your wolf isn't just strong, it's legendary. And once you beat Isolde tomorrow, the entire kingdom will know it. Dawn came too quickly. The challenge ring was set up in the main courtyard, a circle of stones similar to the claiming ritual, but larger, more brutal. This was where disputes were settled with blood and violence, where wolves fought until one submitted or died. The entire court had gathered to watch. Lyra stood at the edge of the ring, dressed in simple fighting leathers. Her wolf prowled inside her chest, eager for the fight. Through the bond, she felt Thorn's steady presence, his faith, his love, his absolute certainty that she would survive. Across the ring, Isolde stretched lazily, her wolf rippling beneath her skin. She looked completely relaxed, as if this were just another morning spar, rather than a battle that would determine the future of the kingdom. Last chance to back out, Isolde called. I'll make it quick, I promise. Lyra didn't bother responding. The elder stepped forward. The challenge is issued and accepted. The fight ends when one wolf submits or falls. Are both parties ready? Ready, Isolde purred. Ready, Lyra said. Then begin. Both women shifted simultaneously. Isolde's wolf was sleek and dark, built for speed. She circled Lyra, testing, looking for weaknesses. Lyra's silver wolf stood at the center of the ring, massive and patient. Waiting. Isolde struck first, a blur of motion aimed at Lyra's throat. But Lyra was ready. She twisted aside and caught Isolde's shoulder in her jaws, using the dark wolf's momentum to throw her across the ring. Isolde hit the ground hard and rolled to her feet, snarling. They clashed again, a tangle of fur and teeth and fury. Blood sprayed. The crowd roared. Lyra felt claws rake across her ribs, but ignored the pain, driving forward, using her size to force Isolde back against the stones. But Isolde was fast. She slipped free and went for Lyra's legs, trying to cripple her. Lyra jumped, twisted in midair, and came down on top of the dark wolf. Her jaws closed around Isolde's throat. Not hard enough to kill, but hard enough to make the threat clear. Submit or die. Isolde thrashed wildly, panic replacing confidence. She couldn't break free, couldn't escape. Lyra's wolf was too strong, too big, too angry. The dark wolf went still. The crowd fell silent. Slowly, Lyra released her grip and stepped back. She shifted to human form, standing over Isolde's prone wolf. Submit, Lyra said quietly. For a long moment, Isolde didn't move. Then, slowly, the dark wolf shifted back to human form. Isolde knelt in the dirt, blood running from wounds on her shoulder and neck, her expression twisted with rage and disbelief. "I submit," she forced out. The courtyard erupted, soldiers cheered, nobles whispered frantically. Common folk shouted Lyra's name like a battle cry. Thorn strode into the ring and pulled Lyra into his arms, not caring that she was covered in blood and dirt. Through the bond, she felt his fierce pride, his overwhelming relief. "That's my queen," he murmured against her hair. Lyra looked past him to where Isolde knelt, still staring at her with hate-filled eyes. This wasn't over. Isolde would plot and scheme and try again, but for now, Lyra had won. She'd proven herself before the entire kingdom. And standing there in the center of the challenge ring, covered in the proof of her victory, Lyra finally understood what Thorn had been trying to tell her all along. She wasn't broken. She never had been. She was a storm that had been waiting to break. And the kingdom was about to learn exactly what that meant. The healers worked through the afternoon, stitching wounds and applying salves that smelled of wintergreen and iron. Lyra sat on the edge of a stone table in Thorn's private chambers, stripped to her undergarments, while a middle-aged woman with gentle hands cleaned the gashes across her ribs. "You're lucky these aren't deeper," the healer murmured. "Another inch and she'd have punctured a lung." "She wasn't trying to puncture anything," Lyra said quietly. "She was trying to scare me into submission." "Well, it didn't work." Mira stood in the corner, arms crossed, her expression caught between pride and disbelief. "You destroyed her, Lyra. I've never seen anything like it. That wolf of yours." She shook her head. "Where the hell has it been hiding?" "Waiting," Lyra said simply. The healer finished bandaging her ribs and moved to examine the wounds on her back. Through the bond, Lyra felt Thorn approaching from somewhere in the castle. His presence was a steady flame, warm and protective. The door opened. Thorn entered, followed by 2 members of the royal council, older men with silver hair and calculating eyes. They stopped short when they saw Lyra half-dressed, but she refused to flinch or cover herself. She'd just beaten one of the kingdom's most skilled wolves in front of the entire court. Modesty felt irrelevant now. "Your Majesty," the healer said, bowing, "the Queen's injuries are extensive but not life-threatening. She'll need rest and she'll have whatever she needs." Thorn's gaze swept over Lyra's bandaged form, and she felt his anger spike through the bond. Not at her, but at the circumstances that had forced her into the ring. "Leave us." The healer gathered her supplies and hurried out. Mira hesitated, but Lyra nodded. Her friend squeezed her shoulder once before following. The 2 council members remained. "Speak," Thorn said flatly, not taking his eyes off Lyra. The taller of the 2 men cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, the council convenes at sunset to discuss the results of the challenge. There are questions about the Queen's legitimacy that must be addressed." Legitimacy. Thorn's voice dropped to something dangerous. She just defeated Lady Isolde in single combat before the entire court. What other legitimacy do you require? "The nature of her wolf, Your Majesty." The second council member stepped forward, his expression carefully neutral. "The elders are saying it bears the mark of the Silverborn bloodline. If true, this changes everything." Lyra straightened despite the pain in her ribs. "Changes what?" "The Silverborn line was thought extinct," the man explained. "They were the original royal family, 300 years ago, before the Ravaran dynasty took the throne. If you carry that blood, he trailed off meaningfully. Then she has a claim to the throne, Thorn finished, his expression unreadable. Perhaps even a stronger claim than mine. Silence filled the chamber. Lyra's mind raced. She'd known her wolf was powerful, had felt the ancient strength flowing through her veins. But royal blood? A claim to the throne? That's impossible, she said. I'm nobody. My parents were soldiers, not nobles. There's no royal blood in my family. Are you certain? The taller council member asked. Because the elders examined the records after your shift. Your mother's lineage traces back to a minor house that disappeared during the purge, the systematic hunting of silver-born wolves. Many families hid their bloodlines, the second man added. Changed their names, married into common houses, all to avoid execution. It's possible your mother descended from survivors without even knowing it. Lyra felt the world tilt sideways. You're saying I'm… what? A lost princess? We're saying you might be the last living descendant of the original royal line, Thorn said quietly, which makes this situation significantly more complicated. Complicated how? Thorn exchanged a look with the council members. Because half the kingdom will want to crown you, and the other half will want you dead. The council convened at sunset in the Great Hall. Lyra sat beside Thorn on a chair that had been hastily constructed to match his throne, smaller but no less ornate, carved with wolves and crescent moons. She wore formal robes of deep blue trimmed with silver, the colors of ancient royalty. Her hair had been braided into an intricate crown. The bond mark on her wrist was displayed proudly, glowing faint silver in the torchlight. She looked every inch a queen, but inside, her stomach churned with nerves. The hall was packed. Nobles filled the benches, their faces a mix of curiosity, hostility, and barely concealed ambition. Soldiers lined the walls. Even common folk had been allowed to stand in the back, witnessing history unfold. Lord Varric stood to address the assembly, his expression sour. We are gathered to discuss the implications of Queen Lyra's heritage. The elders have confirmed that her wolf bears the unmistakable traits of the silverborn bloodline: size, silver coloring, and most significantly, the ability to suppress transformation until maturity. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This presents a unique situation, Varric continued. The Silverborn dynasty ruled for 800 years before the Purge. By ancient law, their bloodline holds precedence over all others. Ancient law that was abolished when my family took the throne, Thorn said coldly. Or have you forgotten that detail, Varric? I forget nothing, Your Majesty, but the law was never formally revoked, merely set aside, which means, technically, Queen Lyra has a legitimate claim to rule. The hall erupted into chaos. Nobles shouted over one another, some supporting the claim, others denouncing it. Lyra sat frozen, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of noise and conflict. Through the bond, Thorn's voice cut through the chaos. Breathe. Don't let them see you rattled. She forced herself to sit straighter, to keep her expression neutral. Enough! Thorn's command rang out like a whip crack. The hall fell silent. The Queen's bloodline does not threaten my crown. It strengthens it. We are bonded. What belongs to her belongs to me, and vice versa. Any claim she has to the throne is a claim we share. But the people might prefer… Someone started. The people will accept what I tell them to accept, Thorn said, his wolf blazing around him. Or they can challenge me for the throne. Anyone, right now, step forward. No one moved. That's what I thought. Thorn leaned back in his throne. Now, unless anyone has something useful to contribute, this council is dismissed. Your Majesty. An elderly woman stood from the front bench, one of the kingdom's most respected elders. If I may? Thorn inclined his head. The elder moved slowly to the center of the hall, leaning on a gnarled staff. Her eyes were clouded with age, but her voice was strong. I was alive during the final days of the Purge. I watched the last Silverborn wolves hunted down and executed. I watched their children burned alive to prevent the bloodline from continuing. The hall went deathly quiet. It was a dark time, the elder continued, driven by fear and ambition. The Ravaran family claimed the throne through blood and brutality, and they have held it ever since. She turned to face Thorn. Your ancestors built this kingdom on the corpses of mine, Your Majesty. That is historical fact. Thorn's expression was unreadable. I'm aware of my family's history, Elder. What's your point? My point is this. The Silverborn line was destroyed not because they were weak, but because they were too strong, too beloved. The people would have followed them into the abyss. The Elder's gaze shifted to Lyra. And now, after 3 centuries, a Silverborn sits beside the throne. Perhaps this is not a threat, but an opportunity. Opportunity for what? Lyra asked, finding her voice. To heal old wounds, to unite bloodlines that have been at war for generations. The Elder smiled faintly. You and the king are bonded. Your children will carry both Silverborn and Ravaran blood. They will be the first rulers in 300 years who can claim legitimacy from both dynasties. The implications settled over the hall like snow. Lyra felt Thorn's hand find hers, their fingers intertwining. Through the bond, she felt his thoughts align with hers. This wasn't just about politics or power. This was about legacy, about building something that could finally put the past to rest. The Elder speaks wisdom, Thorn said quietly. Our bond is not a threat to stability. It is the foundation of a new era. A new era where a wolfless commoner suddenly becomes royalty. Lord Varric's voice dripped with sarcasm. How convenient. She's not wolfless anymore, a voice called from the crowd. Lyra turned to see Mira standing near the back, flanked by other soldiers. Her friend's expression was fierce. She survived the hunt, Mira continued, stepping forward. She killed 4 trained wolves who tried to murder her. She defeated Lady Isolde in single combat. She's proven herself 10 times over, so maybe instead of questioning her bloodline, you should be grateful she's on our side. Several soldiers stomped their feet in agreement, the sound echoing through the hall. Varric's face turned red. This is a council meeting, not a military tribunal. Soldiers have no voice here. They do now, Thorn said, because I'm giving them one. He stood, drawing all eyes. Anyone who served in the northern garrison for the last 5 years has witnessed Queen Lyra's dedication firsthand. They've trained beside her, fought beside her. They know her worth better than any noble who spent their life in silk and safety. More soldiers stepped forward, forming a line behind Mira. Then, to Lyra's shock, some of the common folk in the back joined them. Then a few lower nobles. The line grew and grew until nearly half the hall stood in silent support. Lyra's throat tightened with emotion. These people, soldiers she'd bled with, citizens she'd protected, they were choosing her. Not because of her bloodline or her bond with the king, but because they'd seen her fight, seen her refuse to break. Thorn surveyed the divided hall, his expression satisfied. It seems the matter is settled. Queen Lyra's legitimacy is recognized by both blood and merit. Anyone who wishes to dispute it can bring their challenge directly to me. He sat back down, pulling Lyra closer. Through the bond, she felt his fierce pride. Varric opened his mouth to protest, then seemed to think better of it. He bowed stiffly and retreated to his seat. The council meeting dissolved into smaller discussions, but Lyra barely heard them. She was too focused on the line of people still standing in support, their faces reflecting hope and determination. She'd spent her entire life trying to prove she belonged, and now, for the first time, she truly did. The celebration that night was subdued but genuine. Thorn had ordered a feast in the Great Hall, not the formal, stuffy affairs the nobles preferred, but something closer to what soldiers enjoyed. Long tables loaded with roasted meat and dark bread, barrels of ale, music that was more bawdy than elegant. Lyra sat at the high table beside Thorn, watching her people, and they were her people now, laugh and drink and celebrate. Mira sat nearby, regaling a group of younger soldiers with an exaggerated account of the challenge ring fight. You handled the council well, Thorn murmured, leaning close so only she could hear. Better than I expected. I was terrified, Lyra admitted. I know, I felt it through the bond, but you didn't show it. That's what matters. He brushed his thumb across her bond mark. How do you feel about the Silverborn revelation? Lyra considered the question. Confused. Overwhelmed. I spent my entire life thinking I was nobody, and now I'm supposed to be the last of some ancient royal dynasty? It doesn't feel real. It's real. I've seen the records. Your mother's bloodline traces back through 17 generations of careful hiding and strategic marriages. Someone worked very hard to keep that lineage alive. Thorn paused, which raises the question, did your mother know? She couldn't have. She never said anything, never even hinted. Lyra stopped, a memory surfacing. Wait, there was something. When I was young, maybe 7 or 8, I asked her why I didn't have a wolf like the other children. She told me I was special, that my wolf was sleeping, waiting for the right time to wake up. I thought she was just being comforting. Maybe she was, or maybe she suspected the truth but couldn't tell you. It would have been too dangerous. Thorn's expression darkened. If word had gotten out that a silver-born child existed, my family would have hunted you down. My father was paranoid about threats to the throne. He would have killed you without hesitation. But you didn't. I wasn't king when you arrived at the fortress. By the time I took the throne, you were already established in the guard, already proven, and He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. You what? I was curious about you, the soldier who trained harder than anyone else despite having no wolf. I wanted to see how far you'd go, what you'd become. He met her eyes. I never expected to fall in love with you. Lyra's breath caught. They'd felt it through the bond, but hearing him say the words aloud was different, more real, more permanent. I love you too, she whispered. Thorn's hand found hers under the table, their fingers intertwining. For a moment, everything else, the politics, the bloodlines, the power struggles, faded away. There was only the two of them, bonded and unbreakable. A commotion near the doors broke the moment. Lyra looked up to see guards escorting someone into the hall. As the crowd parted, she recognized the figure. Rowan. The prince looked terrible. His golden hair was disheveled, his clothes wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. He walked like a man going to his execution, flanked by grim-faced soldiers. The hall fell silent. Thorn's expression went cold. What is this? Your Majesty. The lead guard bowed. Prince Rowan requested an audience. He says it's urgent. I have nothing to say to my brother. Please, Rowan's voice cracked. Just let me speak. 5 minutes. That's all I ask. Lyra felt Thorn's anger through the bond, felt his instinct to refuse, but she also felt her own curiosity. What could Rowan possibly want? Let him speak, she said quietly. Thorn's head snapped toward her. Lyra. 5 minutes. Then he leaves. After a long moment, Thorn nodded. 5 minutes. And if you waste my time, brother, I'll have you thrown in the dungeons. Rowan approached the high table, stopping several feet away. He looked at Lyra, and she saw genuine remorse in his eyes. Also shame. Fear. I came to apologize, Rowan said, for what I did at the ritual, for abandoning you, for being weak. Is that supposed to make it better? Lyra asked, her voice flat. No, nothing can make it better, but you deserve to know the truth. Rowan's hands clenched into fists at his sides. I wanted to claim you. I meant every promise I made. But when the moment came, when I saw the entire court watching, waiting for me to fail, I couldn't do it. I was too afraid of what they'd say, what they'd think. So I walked away and left me to be humiliated in front of the kingdom. Yes, Rowan's voice broke. And I've hated myself every moment since. Watching you survive the hunt, watching you defeat Isolde, watching you become the queen I was too cowardly to let you be. He looked at Thorn. You were right about me, brother. I'm not strong. I never was. You took the crown because you deserved it, and you claimed Lyra because you saw what I was too blind to see, that she was always meant for greatness. Thorn said nothing, his expression carved from stone. I don't expect forgiveness, Rowan continued. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and that I'm leaving, tomorrow. I've requested a transfer to the Eastern Garrison. I won't be at court anymore. Won't be a reminder of my failure. He bowed once, formally, and turned to leave. Wait, Lyra said. Rowan stopped. Lyra stood, ignoring the pain in her ribs. She walked around the table until she stood face to face with the man she'd once loved, the man who'd broken her heart. I don't forgive you, she said quietly. What you did in that circle, It destroyed something inside me that can never be rebuilt. But I understand why you did it. Fear makes cowards of us all. Rowan's eyes glistened. I loved you, Lyra. I still do. No. You loved the idea of me. The convenient choice. The girl who'd be grateful enough not to demand too much. She shook her head. Thorn loves the reality of me. The strength, the stubbornness, the wolf that terrifies half the kingdom. That's the difference. I know. Rowan's voice was barely a whisper. I hope you find happiness. Both of you. You deserve it. He turned and walked out of the hall, his shoulders bowed under the weight of his regrets. Lyra watched him go and felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a distant sense of closure. The girl who'd loved Prince Rowan was dead. In her place stood a queen. The days that followed were a whirlwind of politics and power struggles. Lyra threw herself into learning everything required of her new position. She attended council meetings, studied ancient law, met with representatives from every corner of the kingdom. Thorn was beside her through it all, teaching her the intricate dance of royal politics. Never show weakness in council, he told her one afternoon as they reviewed trade agreements. The nobles are like wolves, they can smell fear. If you don't know something, don't pretend. Ask questions, demand clarity, make them explain until you understand. And if they refuse, then you remind them who you are. Thorn's smile was sharp. You're not just any queen. You're the last Silverborn. That bloodline commands respect and fear. Lyra was learning to use both. She also spent hours working with her wolf, learning to shift quickly and efficiently. The transformation was becoming second nature now, as natural as breathing. Her silver wolf was magnificent, larger than any other she-wolf in the kingdom, with power that seemed to radiate from her very bones. The soldiers adored her. Every morning she trained with them in the yard, pushing herself as hard as she pushed them. She ate in their mess hall, learned their names, listened to their concerns. You're building an army, Mira observed one evening as they sparred, not of soldiers, but of loyalists. I'm building a foundation, Lyra corrected, blocking a strike. Thorn rules through strength and fear. I'm offering something different. Respect, understanding. They follow him because they have to. I want them to follow me because they want to. Smart, Mira grinned. Terrifying, but smart. But not everyone was pleased with Lyra's growing influence. 2 weeks after the challenge ring, she was attacked. It happened in the castle corridors late at night. Lyra was returning to her chambers after a council meeting when 3 figures emerged from the shadows, blades gleaming in the torchlight. They moved fast, trained assassins, not common thugs. Lyra's wolf surged to the surface, but there wasn't time to shift. She grabbed a torch from the wall and swung it like a weapon, forcing the attackers back. The Silverborn line dies tonight, one of them hissed. Lyra drove the torch into his face. He screamed and fell back. The other 2 lunged simultaneously. She felt a blade slice across her arm, felt hot blood spray. But she'd spent years training in these halls, knew every corner and alcove. She used that knowledge now, leading the assassins into a narrow corridor where they couldn't flank her. Then she shifted. The silver wolf exploded into being with a roar that shook the stones. The assassins' confidence evaporated. They turned to run, but Lyra was faster. She caught the first one and crushed his throat with her jaws. The second made it 5 steps before she brought him down. The third, the one she'd burned with the torch, stumbled through a doorway. Lyra shifted back to human form and followed, her hand pressed against the wound on her arm. The assassin collapsed in the throne room, smoke still rising from his ruined face. Lyra kicked his blade away and crouched beside him. "Who sent you?" she demanded. He laughed, blood bubbling from his lips. "You'll never know, but you'll die before the month ends. The council won't allow a Silverborn on the throne. Never again." "Then the council is going to be disappointed." The assassin died with that laugh still frozen on his face. Thorn found her minutes later, summoned by the Bond's distress signal. He took one look at the bodies, at Lyra covered in blood, and pulled her into his arms. "This ends now," he said, his voice deadly calm. "I'm done playing political games." The council was summoned at dawn, still rubbing sleep from their eyes. But any drowsiness vanished when they entered the throne room and saw what waited for them. The three assassins' bodies were laid out in the center of the hall. Beside them stood Lyra, her arm bandaged but her spine straight, her wolf visible just beneath her skin. Thorn sat on his throne, expression carved from winter stone. "Someone in this room tried to have my queen murdered," Thorn said without preamble. "I want them to step forward now." Silence. "No? Then allow me to explain what happens next. I'm going to investigate every single council member, every transaction, every correspondence, every whispered conversation, and when I find the guilty parties, and I will find them, I'm going to execute them in the public square." Lord Varric cleared his throat nervously. "Your Majesty, surely such drastic measures are necessary." Thorn stood, his wolf blazing. "Someone tried to kill my mate, my queen, the woman who carries the last of the Silverborn bloodline. That's not just treason against me, that's an attack on the kingdom itself. Perhaps if the queen were less aggressive in asserting her position," another noble suggested carefully. "There are those who feel threatened by her rapid rise to power." "Then they're welcome to challenge her directly," Lyra said, her voice carrying through the hall. "I beat Isolde. I survived the hunt. I killed 3 trained assassins last night. If anyone thinks I'm not worthy of my position, step into the ring and prove it." No one moved. "That's what I thought." Lyra turned to address the full council. "I didn't ask for this bloodline. I didn't ask to be queen, but I am both those things now, and I'm not going anywhere. So you have a choice: accept it and work with me, or oppose me and face the consequences." "Is that a threat?" Varric asked. "It's a promise." Lyra's wolf surged closer to the surface, her eyes glowing silver. "I spent my entire life being underestimated, being mocked, being told I was worthless, and I survived. I'm done apologizing for being strong, done making myself smaller so others feel comfortable. This is who I am. Accept it or challenge me. Those are your only options." The silence that followed was absolute. Then, slowly, the elderly woman who'd spoken at the previous council meeting stood. She walked to the center of the hall and knelt before Lyra. "I accept you, Queen Lyra, as the last Silverborn, as our rightful ruler, as the future of this kingdom." Another noble stood, then another. One by one, they came forward and knelt, some genuine, some calculated, but all acknowledging her power. Within minutes, half the council was kneeling. Varric remained seated, his expression twisted with fury. But he was outnumbered now, isolated, and he knew it. Thorn descended from his throne and stood beside Lyra, their hands intertwining. "The matter is settled. Queen Lyra's position is secured. Anyone who disagrees can bring their concerns to me personally." The implied threat hung heavy in the air. The council dismissed shortly after, nobles hurrying away to process what had just happened. Lyra watched them go, feeling something shift inside her chest. This was the turning point, the moment when she stopped being the girl who had to prove herself and became the queen who demanded recognition. "You were magnificent," Thorn murmured, pulling her close. "I was terrifying." "Same thing." He kissed her forehead. "The investigation starts today. Whoever ordered those assassins will be found. And when you find them, then they'll learn what happens when someone threatens what's mine." Lyra leaned into his embrace, feeling his strength, his certainty, his absolute refusal to let anyone harm her. Through the bond, their wolves recognized each other, 2 apex predators who'd chosen to hunt together rather than alone. The kingdom was finally beginning to understand. The girl they'd called broken had become the most dangerous force in Ravoren, and she was just getting started. The investigation took 3 days. Thorn's methods were brutal and efficient. He locked down the castle, allowing no one in or out. Every council member was questioned under the watchful eyes of the royal guard. Every servant, every noble, every person who'd had access to the corridors the night of the attack was interrogated. Letters were seized. Private chambers were searched. The entire fortress became a prison where secrets had nowhere to hide. Lyra watched it all unfold with grim satisfaction. She spent those 3 days consolidating her own power. She met privately with the soldiers who'd stood with her in the council hall, learning their names and their grievances. She walked through the city below the fortress, speaking with merchants and craftspeople who'd never seen royalty up close before. She was building something Thorn had never bothered with, a connection to the common people. "You're making them love you," Mira observed on the second day as they returned from the market district. "That's dangerous." "Why?" "Because love is more powerful than fear. And if the people love you more than they fear Thorn," Mira trailed off meaningfully. "He's my mate, my king. I'm not trying to undermine him." "I know that, but the nobles don't. They see you gaining influence, building loyalty, and they're terrified. Thorn rules through dominance. You're offering something different, something that could change the entire power structure of this kingdom." Lyra considered that as they climbed the fortress steps. She'd never thought about it in those terms, revolution versus tradition. But Mira was right. By simply being herself, by refusing to rule through fear alone, she was challenging 300 years of precedent. "Maybe that's not a bad thing," Lyra said quietly. "Maybe not, but it's definitely going to cause problems." The problems arrived that evening. Thorn summoned her to the throne room with a single pulse through the bond. When Lyra entered, she found him standing over Lord Varric, who knelt in chains at the base of the throne. 2 other council members knelt beside him, their faces ashen with terror. "We found them," Thorn said without preamble. "Varric orchestrated the assassination attempt. These 2 financed it." Lyra felt her wolf surge toward the surface. She approached slowly, her eyes locked on Varric's face. The old nobleman looked diminished now, stripped of his pride and power. "Why?" she asked simply. Varric's laugh was bitter. "Why? You're asking me why I tried to kill you? You're a threat to everything we've built, everything we've fought for. The Silverborn line should have stayed buried, should have stayed extinct. Because you're afraid of what I represent. Because we know what you represent." Varric's composure cracked. "Your ancestors ruled through compassion, through mercy, through giving the common people a voice. It made them weak. Made the kingdom weak. That's why my family helped destroy them. That's why we put the Ravaran line on the throne, because they understood that power requires brutality, requires fear." "And now you think I'm going to undo all that," Lyra said. "I know you are. I've watched you, seen how you talk to the soldiers, how you walk among the common folk. You're planting seeds of revolution, whether you realize it or not. And when those seeds bloom, they'll tear this kingdom apart." Thorn descended from his throne, his presence radiating menace. "Then I suppose it's fortunate that you won't be alive to see it." Varric's face went white. "Your Majesty, you tried to murder my queen, my mate, the woman I love. There is no mercy for that, no forgiveness." Thorn's voice dropped to something barely human. "You're going to die, Varric. The only question is how much you suffer first. Wait." Lyra's hand touched Thorn's arm, stopping him. Through the bond, she felt his rage, his hunger for vengeance. But she also felt something else, an opportunity. "There's a better way. He tried to kill you." "I know, but killing him in secret accomplishes nothing. The nobles need to see what happens when someone attacks their queen. The people need to understand that I'm not weak, that I won't tolerate threats." She looked at Varric. "A public execution, tomorrow at dawn, in the main square where everyone can witness." Varric's breath caught. You can't." "I can, and I will." Lyra turned to Thorn. "Unless my king objects?" Thorn studied her face, reading the determination there. Then, slowly, he smiled. "No objection. In fact, I think it's perfect." He signaled to the guards. "Take them to the dungeons. At dawn, they die." Word spread through the kingdom like wildfire. By dawn, thousands had gathered in the main square. Common folk, soldiers, nobles, all crammed together to witness the execution. The scaffold had been built during the night, a temporary platform of dark wood that dominated the space. Lyra stood on the castle battlements, watching the crowd gather. She was dressed in full royal regalia, armor of silver and midnight blue, a cloak that flowed like liquid shadow, a crown of twisted metal that caught the rising sun. She looked like a warrior queen from ancient legend. Thorn stood beside her, similarly armed and armored. You don't have to watch, he said quietly. Yes, I do. They tried to kill me. I need to see them answer for it. This is your first execution as queen. It won't be easy. Nothing about this has been easy. Lyra turned to face him. But I'm not the scared soldier who stood in the ritual circle anymore. I'm the woman who survived the hunt, who defeated Isolde, who killed 3 assassins with my bare hands. I can watch 3 traitors die. Then let's go make an example of them. They descended together, walking through the crowd. The people parted before them, some bowing, others simply staring in awe. Lyra kept her spine straight, her expression neutral. She could feel thousands of eyes on her, weighing her, judging her. When they reached the scaffold, Thorn spoke first. People of Reverin, his voice carried across the square. 3 days ago, assassins attacked your queen in the halls of our own castle. They sought to murder her in secret, to end the Silverborn bloodline once and for all. We have found the conspirators responsible. Guards dragged Varric and the other 2 council members onto the scaffold. All 3 looked haggard, beaten, their fine clothes torn and stained. Varric's eyes found Lyra's, and she saw hatred burning there despite his circumstances. Lord Varric, Thorn continued, you stand accused of conspiracy to commit murder, treason against the crown, and attempting to assassinate the queen. How do you plead? Guilty, Varric said clearly, and I'd do it again. She doesn't belong on that throne. She's poison. She'll destroy everything our family's built. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, shock, anger, confusion. Lyra stepped forward. You tried to kill me because you feared change, because I represent something different from what you've known. But you made one critical mistake, Lord Varric. What's that? You assumed I was weak because I showed compassion. You thought mercy meant softness. You believed I couldn't be both kind and ruthless. Her voice hardened. You were wrong. She turned to address the crowd. I am the last of the Silverborn bloodline. My ancestors ruled this kingdom for 800 years before they were hunted to extinction. I grew up not knowing my heritage, not knowing my worth. I spent 23 years believing I was defective because I had no wolf. But the truth is, my wolf was simply waiting for me to be strong enough to contain its power. She let her wolf surge to the surface, just enough that her eyes glowed silver and her presence radiated authority. I didn't ask to be queen, Lyra continued. I didn't ask for this bloodline or this power. But I have both now. And I will use them to build a kingdom where strength is measured not just by fear and brutality, but by courage and compassion, where the common people have a voice, where soldiers are valued, where no one has to spend their life proving they deserve to exist. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. But make no mistake, Lyra said, her voice dropping to something dangerous. I will not tolerate threats, will not accept betrayal. Anyone who tries to harm me, who plots against my crown, who seeks to undo what I'm building, they will face the same fate as these 3 traitors. She nodded to the executioner. The blade fell 3 times. Varric died last, his expression twisted with rage even in death. Lyra watched without flinching. She felt the weight of those deaths settle onto her shoulders like a mantle, heavy and permanent. This was what it meant to be queen, not just the crown and the power, but the responsibility, the hard choices, the blood. When it was done, Thorn took her hand. People of Reverin, he called out, I present to you Queen Lyra, the last Silverborn, and the strongest ruler this kingdom has seen in 3 centuries. Any who doubt her can bring their challenge to the throne. But know this, she has my full support, my complete loyalty. What threatens her threatens me. What serves her serves the kingdom. He turned to Lyra, and before the entire crowd knelt. The Alpha King, who had never bowed to anyone, knelt before his queen. The crowd erupted. Some cheered, some wept, some simply stood in stunned silence. And one by one, the people began to kneel. Soldiers first, then common folk. Then finally the nobles who understood that the balance of power had fundamentally shifted. Lyra stood at the center of it all, feeling the weight of their recognition. She was no longer the wolfless soldier begging for scraps of respect. She was their queen, and they would remember this moment forever. The weeks that followed were a transformation. Lyra threw herself into restructuring the kingdom's power dynamics. She established a council of common representatives, merchants, farmers, craftspeople, who could bring their concerns directly to the throne. She reformed the military, promoting soldiers based on merit rather than bloodline. She created new laws protecting the vulnerable, the poor, the forgotten. And she did it all with Thorn at her side. They became a team, his strength and her compassion, his dominance and her diplomacy. Where he ruled through fear, she offered hope. Where he crushed opposition, she built bridges. Together, they were unstoppable. "You're changing the kingdom," Mira observed one afternoon as they watched construction begin on a new hospital in the lower city. "Actually changing it. I didn't think that was possible." "Neither did I," Lyra admitted. "But Thorn gave me the power to try. He could have kept me as just a figurehead, a pretty crown beside his throne. Instead, he's letting me rebuild everything. Because he loves you. And because he's smart enough to know that fear alone can't hold a kingdom together forever. People need something to believe in, something to hope for." Lyra smiled. "I'm giving them that." But not everyone was pleased with the changes. 3 months after Varric's execution, a rebellion sparked in the southern provinces. A coalition of nobles who'd lost power under the new reforms gathered an army and marched north toward the capital. "They're calling themselves the Traditionalist Alliance," Thorn explained, reviewing battle reports in the war room. "Led by Lady Isolde's cousin, Lord Brennan, he's demanding we reverse all the reforms and restore the old power structures." "How many soldiers does he have?" 5,000, maybe more, and they're well equipped." Thorn's expression was grim. "This is going to be a real war, Lyra. Not a skirmish or a raid. Hundreds, maybe thousands will die. Then we stop them before they reach the capital. We meet them in the field and end this quickly." "We?" Thorn raised an eyebrow. "You're planning to fight?" "I'm not hiding in the castle while my people go to war. I'm their queen. They need to see me." "You're also pregnant." The words hung in the air between them. Lyra's hand moved unconsciously to her stomach. She'd suspected for weeks but had only confirmed it with the royal healer 3 days ago. The child growing inside her carried both Silverborn and Ravoran blood, the first such heir in 3 centuries. "I'm 2 months along," she said quietly, "not showing yet. Still strong enough to fight." "Lyra, no! Don't try to protect me from this. The nobles are rebelling because they think I've made the kingdom weak. If I hide while you fight my battles, I prove them right. But if I stand on this battlefield beside you, if I show them that a Silverborn queen can be both compassionate and deadly," she met his eyes, "then we win more than just a battle. We win the future." Thorn was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled her close, his hand resting over her still flat stomach. "Promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you'll retreat if things go badly, because I can't lose you, either of you." "I promise." "Liar." But he smiled, kissing her forehead. "You're going to be magnificent and terrifying, and I'm going to spend the entire battle having a heart attack. That's what being married to me means. Best decision I ever made." The armies met on this plain south of the capital, beneath a sky heavy with storm clouds. Lyra sat atop a massive war horse, her silver armor gleaming, her wolf prowling just beneath her skin. Behind her stood 10,000 loyal soldiers, men and women who'd trained with her, fought beside her, who believed in the kingdom she was building. Across the field, the Traditionalist Alliance waited. Their banners were black and red, symbols of the old noble houses. At their center rode Lord Brennan, resplendent in gilded armor. Thorn sat on his own warhorse beside Lyra, his presence radiating barely controlled violence. "Last chance to reconsider," he said. "Not a chance." "Didn't think so." He raised his voice to address the army. "Soldiers of Ravaran, today we fight not for territory or glory, but for the future. The nobles across this field want to drag us back to a time when strength meant brutality, when power meant oppression. Your queen," he gestured to Lyra, "offers something different. A kingdom where all of us matter, where our children can grow up without fear, where compassion and courage go hand in hand." Cheers erupted from the ranks. "So today," Thorn continued, "we fight for her. We fight for that future, and we show these traditionalist bastards exactly what happens when they threaten our queen." The army roared its approval. Across the field, Lord Brennan raised his sword. His army surged forward like a dark wave. "Here they come," Lyra said, her wolf rising to the surface. "Are you ready?" Thorn's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Always." They charged. The armies collided with a sound like thunder. Metal screamed against metal. Wolves tore into each other with savage fury. The battlefield became chaos, blood and mud and violence painting the earth red. Lyra fought like a creature possessed. She shifted between human and wolf form seamlessly, using her size and speed to devastating effect. Soldiers fell before her, their weapons useless against the ancient power flowing through her veins. Beside her, Thorn was a force of nature. His wolf was massive and brutal, crushing enemies with raw strength. Together they carved a path through the traditionalist forces like a blade through flesh. But there were so many. For every soldier they killed, 3 more appeared. The Traditionalist Alliance had numbers on their side, and they used it ruthlessly. Lyra felt exhaustion creeping into her muscles, felt wounds accumulating across her body. Through the bond, she felt Thorn's concern. "Fall back. You need to rest." "Not until this is finished, Lyra." "I'm not retreating. Not today." She shifted back to human form and grabbed a fallen sword. A Traditionalist soldier charged her, his wolf form massive and scarred. Lyra sidestepped his lunge and drove her blade through his ribs. He fell with a howl. Another came. Then another. She fought until her arms burned, until blood ran into her eyes, until every breath was agony. And then she saw him, Lord Brennan, fighting his way toward her through the chaos. His wolf was enormous, nearly as large as Thorn's, with eyes that burned with fanatical hatred. "There she is," Brennan roared. "The false queen, the silver-born pretender." He charged. Lyra shifted, her silver wolf exploding into being. They collided in midair, a tangle of claws and teeth. Brennan was strong, experienced, vicious. He fought with the desperation of someone who knew this was his last chance to stop the changes sweeping through the kingdom. But Lyra had something he didn't. She had something worth fighting for. She twisted in his grip, her jaws finding his throat. Brennan thrashed, trying to throw her off. His claws raked across her side, tearing deep. Pain exploded through her body, but she held on. For the kingdom, she thought. For the future. For my child. She bit down. Brennan's wolf went limp. The Traditionalist Alliance saw their leader fall and faltered. Some tried to retreat. Others fought on with renewed desperation, but the momentum had shifted. Thorn's forces pressed the advantage, driving the enemy back, surrounding them, cutting them down. By sunset, it was over. Bodies covered the battlefield. The grass was soaked red. Hundreds had died on both sides. But the Traditionalists had been defeated. Lyra shifted back to human form and collapsed to her knees, breathing hard. Blood ran from dozens of wounds. Her entire body shook with exhaustion. Thorn was beside her instantly, pulling her into his arms. "You're hurt." "I'm alive." "Barely." He examined the deep gashes across her side, his expression dark. "You promised to be careful." "I promised to retreat if things went badly. Things didn't go badly. We won." "You're impossible." "You love me anyway." "I do." He kissed her forehead, then scooped her into his arms. "Healers, now!" The royal healers rushed forward, their hands already glowing with healing magic. They worked quickly, closing the worst wounds, stabilizing her condition. "The baby?" Lyra asked, her voice tight with fear. The head healer pressed her hands gently against Lyra's stomach, her eyes closing in concentration. After a moment that felt like eternity, she smiled. "Strong, healthy. Your child is a fighter, just like you." Lyra sagged with relief. Around them, the surviving soldiers began to cheer. The sound started small, but grew and grew until it seemed to shake the earth itself. "Queen Lyra! Queen Lyra! Queen Lyra!" They were chanting her name, celebrating her victory, recognizing her as their true leader. Lyra looked out over the battlefield, at the soldiers who'd fought for her, at the kingdom she'd bled to protect. This was the turning point. The moment when she stopped being the girl who had to prove herself and became the queen who'd earned her crown through fire and blood. "Help me up," she told Thorn. "You need rest. Help me up." He sighed but obeyed, supporting her weight as she stood. Lyra raised her bloodied hand, and the cheering intensified. "Soldiers of Ravarin," she called out, her voice carrying across the field. "Today we didn't just win a battle. We won the right to build the future we deserve, a future where strength means more than brutality, where compassion doesn't equal weakness, where all of us, common-born and noble-born, wolf and human, can live without fear." The soldiers roared their approval. "The old world is dead," Lyra continued, "buried here on this battlefield. What rises from these ashes will be something new, something better. And I swear to you, on my bloodline and my crown, that I will fight for that future every day for the rest of my life." The cheering became deafening. Thorn pulled her close, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "You did it. You actually did it. Changed the entire kingdom in less than a year." "We did it, together." "Together," he agreed, his hand moving to rest over her stomach where their child grew. "And we'll keep doing it, for them." 6 months later, Lyra gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl, both healthy and strong, both carrying the unmistakable traits of silver-born blood. The kingdom celebrated for 3 days straight. Nobles and common folk alike gathered at the castle to catch a glimpse of the heirs who would unite the bloodlines. Lyra sat in her private chambers, cradling her daughter while Thorn held their son. Both babies had their father's gray eyes and their mother's silver hair. Both already showed signs of powerful wolves sleeping within. "They're perfect," Thorn murmured, wonder evident in his voice. "Absolutely perfect. They're the future." Lyra looked down at her daughter's tiny face. The first generation born into a kingdom where Silverborn and Ravarin blood aren't enemies, where old wounds can finally heal. What should we name them? Lyra had thought about this for months. Theron, for your father's father, the one who first showed mercy to defeated enemies. And Alara, for my mother, who kept our bloodline alive by hiding it. Theron and Alara. Thorn tested the names. The twin heirs of Ravarin, the bridge between dynasties. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mira entered, carrying official documents. "Sorry to disturb, but the council needs your signatures on the new trade agreements, and the southern lords are requesting an audience about the reconstruction efforts." "Tell them tomorrow," Lyra said. "Today I'm just a mother." "Yes, Your Majesty," Mira smiled, looking at the twins. "They're beautiful, by the way. You did good." After Mira left, Lyra leaned back against the pillows, exhaustion and contentment warring inside her. She'd come so far from the scared soldier who'd stood trembling in the ritual circle, so far from the girl who'd believed she was worthless. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked Thorn. "The claiming ritual? Every day." "Do you regret claiming me? Are you serious?" Thorn shifted their son carefully and reached over to take her hand. "Lyra, claiming you was the best decision I've ever made. You've changed everything, the kingdom, me, the entire future of our bloodline. How could I possibly regret that? I still can't believe sometimes that this is real, that I'm here, that I'm queen. Believe it, because you earned every bit of it." He squeezed her hand. "You survived the impossible, defeated enemies who should have destroyed you, built a kingdom worth living in. And you did it all while the world told you that you were too weak, too broken, too worthless to matter." Tears pricked at Lyra's eyes. "I had help." "You had yourself. I just gave you the opportunity to show everyone what you already were." Their daughter stirred, making a small sound. Lyra looked down at her tiny face and felt overwhelming love wash through her. This was why she'd fought, why she'd survived. Why she'd refused to break no matter how hard they tried to destroy her, for this moment, this family, this future. "I love you," she whispered to Thorn. "I love you too." He leaned over and kissed her gently. "My queen, my mate, my everything." 5 years later, Lyra stood on the castle battlements, watching her children play in the courtyard below. Theron and Alara had grown into beautiful, precocious children. Both had shifted for the first time on their 4th birthday, earlier than most wolves, and their beasts were already showing signs of incredible power. Theron's wolf was dark, like his father's, massive and dominant. Alara's was silver like her mother's, graceful and fierce. They played together now, chasing each other in wolf form while their guards watched carefully. Other children joined them, sons and daughters of nobles and common folk alike, all playing together without regard for bloodline or status. That was the kingdom Lyra had built. "They're getting big," Mira said, joining her at the railing. Her friend had risen through the ranks to become commander of the royal guard, a position she filled with honor and competence. "Too big. I swear they were babies just yesterday." "That's what happens when you're busy rebuilding an entire kingdom," Mira smiled. "The new schools are opening next month, by the way. 12 total, spread across every province. Free education for any child who wants it, regardless of status." "That was always the dream," Lyra said softly. "A kingdom where everyone has a chance, where no child grows up thinking they're worthless because they're different." "You did it. Against all odds, you actually did it." Lyra thought back to that terrified girl in the ritual circle, abandoned and humiliated before the entire court. She thought about the hunt, the assassins, the battle on the plains, every moment of pain and struggle that had brought her here. "I almost didn't," she admitted. "So many times I almost gave up, almost believed them when they said I was broken, defective, worthless." "But you didn't." "No, I didn't." Lyra turned to face her friend. "Because I had people who believed in me. You, Thorn, the soldiers who stood with me when the nobles wanted me dead. And eventually, I started believing in myself." That's the real transformation, isn't it? Not the wolf, not the crown, just learning to see yourself the way others see you. "Maybe," Lyra smiled. "Or maybe it was always there, and I just needed the right circumstances to let it out." Thorn emerged from the castle, striding toward them, with the confidence of a man who'd never doubted his place in the world. He kissed Lyra briefly, then leaned against the railing to watch their children play. "Council meeting in an hour," he said. "They want to discuss the northern expansion proposals." "Of course they do," Lyra sighed. "Being queen never stops, does it?" "Never. But you love it anyway." "I do." She looked out over the kingdom spread below the fortress, the city bustling with life, the fields green with crops, the roads busy with trade. This was the future she'd fought for, the world she'd bled to create. "I really do." Below, Alara's wolf caught Theron's and both tumbled into a playful heap. Their laughter rang out, pure and innocent, the sound of children who'd never known what it meant to be rejected, to be called broken, to be told they didn't belong. They would grow up in a different world than Lyra had, a better world. And that, more than anything, was her greatest victory. That night, Lyra dreamed. She stood in the ritual circle again, but this time she wasn't alone. Beside her stood the ghost of her younger self, the scared soldier with no wolf, trembling before the judgment of the court. "You survived," the ghost whispered. "We survived," Lyra corrected. "They said we were broken. They were wrong. They said we'd never be enough. They were blind." The ghost looked up at her, eyes shining with unshed tears. "What happens now?" Lyra smiled and held out her hand. "Now we live. We rule. We build a kingdom where no one else has to feel the way we felt, where strength comes in many forms, where being different doesn't mean being worthless." The ghost took her hand, and as their fingers touched, she transformed, growing taller, stronger, more confident. The scared soldier disappeared, replaced by the queen Lyra had become. They were the same person, separated by years of struggle and growth. "Thank you," the ghost that was no longer a ghost said, "for not giving up on us." "Never," Lyra promised. "We were always worth fighting for. We just had to learn that for ourselves." When she woke, dawn was breaking over the mountains. Thorn slept beside her, one arm draped protectively across her waist. Through the windows, she could hear the castle coming to life. Servants beginning their duties, guards changing shifts, the kingdom starting another day. Her kingdom. Lyra rose quietly and walked to the balcony. The bond mark on her wrist glowed faintly in the morning light, a permanent reminder of the night that changed everything, the night the king broke tradition and claimed a wolfless soldier, the night her real life began. She thought about all the people who'd doubted her, who'd laughed at her, who'd tried to destroy her. And she smiled. because she'd proven them all wrong. The girl everyone called broken had become the strongest force in the kingdom. The woman they'd rejected had become their queen. The wolf they said would never awaken had become legendary. She was Lyra Vale, last of the Silverborn, queen of Ravaran, mate to the Alpha King, mother to the future. And she was exactly where she belonged. The sun rose higher, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. A new day, a new era. The storm had broken, and in its wake, a queen had risen.